All right. So thank you for being with me tonight. Whether you're watching it live or later on, I wanted to make sure that I provided some information to you for you that could be helpful for your health and your families. And a lot of this came about because of all the stuff that happened with COVID. And I met Christy, it was about a year ago now. And Christy was at a healthcare workers networking thing, and she brought up some information that she's going to be sharing with us. But it kind of hit me hard that a lot of people don't know some of the legal things that they need to do and stuff that they need to discuss, because at that time, so much of people's situations where they were going into the hospital, they were by themselves. And if you didn't have something written up to protect yourself or a family member that was more incapacitated, a lot of things were happening that people did not want to have happen to their bodies. So that was kind of the impetus of this. And then I thought, wait a minute, when I heard this, let's include this person, and heard this, let's include this person. So we're going to get started, and we're going to talk about credit first, because I had never thought of some of the things that Jen shared with me recently, and I'm like, well, let's get started. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to change this a little bit. So Jen Pricek, you can go ahead and get started, and I'm going to share my screen to share a little bit of the information. So keeping our family safe. Disclaimer, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not making any medical claims, but usually it doesn't really matter on this kind of thing. So just be aware, you got to take care of yourself. So Jennifer is going to start with the credit information. This is her contact information. I'm going to leave that up for a minute, and then I'll stop the share, but I'll bring it back up. So Jennifer, can you share a little bit about kind of a personal story with how you got into what you're doing right now?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a mortgage lender, so I do home loans, and how the reason my passion for credit and educating on this is several years ago, my husband and I wanted to purchase a home. We were living in Austin and paying ridiculous amounts of rent. And, everyone keeps saying to look into it, but we didn't even know where to start. So we applied with our bank that we banked at for years, and we didn't get a response. Like no phone call, no email, no nothing, until we just get something in the mail that was a denial letter, and it had our credit scores attached to it, which, let's see, we were probably our late 20s back then. Didn't even know what our credit scores were, how to check them. And then now you're like, well, now what? What do I do? How do I get it up? And where do you go from here? We applied someplace else, kind of the same story. And so I was talking to our someone at church about it. They were telling me to get with, and at the time he was a youth minister at our church, and he worked for a mortgage company. And so he sat down with my husband and I and printed out our credit report. We had never seen it before. And he gave us a game plan of what to do. It took us a full year to get to where our scores were so that we could qualify for a home. And so I know what it's like to be on that side and just to feel not educated, like I have a college degree. Why don't I know anything about my credit or what to do to fix it? Or, the fact that I was always told, don't open a credit card. They are bad. And he's sitting here saying, you have to open a credit card. So it was just all this different information to get there. So that's really why I'm passionate, about educating on credit. And then it also helps people to purchase homes in the long run, or cars, or have better rates on anything. So let me just go into.
Yeah. And so the reason that I thought I wanted to have you kind of share something that I hadn't thought about before, I have a 20-year-old son. And when we were talking about credit and checking credit, I was like, I had never thought about checking my son's credit. Mm-hmm. I know I check mine about once a year, but to do it the right way, I think is really important. So if you want to start with kind of that, sure. And then we can talk about repair. Yeah. Does that sound good? Okay, so I'm going to do a little screen share. So if somebody wants to write this information down, this is important.
Yeah, I'll provide the website and everything for you. So that annualcreditreport.com used to be what the name was. You can check your credit report annually, but with COVID now you can check it monthly. And that was just because since COVID, the amounts of fraud skyrocketed. And so they did this to allow consumers to be able to keep track of what was going on in their credit report. This is the only free and trusted source that I would ever suggest to a client to go to. Don't Google it. Don't, you're going to go down a rabbit trail of all kinds of spam. This is a free and trusted site. It's going to show you just your credit report, not your score. But what it does is it shows you all the trade lines that are reporting for you. Everything you've ever opened. So my very first student loan that I ever had is going to show up there, even though it's closed. And so that was one of the things that hurt my husband, is that he had a lot of stuff on his credit report that wasn't his. And so we had to go through that process of trying to get it taken off that we didn't even know existed, and which was hurting his credit score. But if you're not checking it and seeing those trade lines, or it'll also show you if someone pulled your credit. So if you see that K Jewelers pulled your credit and you are not, in the process of shopping for anything, then that's going to be a red flag for you to freeze your credit so that no one, can open anything under your name. This ftc.gov is the government website that walks you through the process if you're wanting to deal with any type of fraud or identity theft. And so that's real, and it has really good articles in there and good just direction points and sample letters if you need to mail them off to anybody. And so it just really walks you through it. But, also having a resource, I'm happy to answer those questions as well. But when you talk about, pulling your kid's credit, one thing that you asked me to share about was freezing your child's credit, but not just your child, but maybe your elderly parents. And on the next slide, I've got all of the credit bureau's websites that you can go in and freeze your credit. And the reason that you want to freeze at least one of them, I would advise all consumers to freeze at least one of them, is because if someone tries to run your credit, open up a Target credit card, take out a loan in your name, the bureaus have it frozen and they have to confirm with you in order to unfreeze it for someone to access it. And so all three is kind of, it's going to be a lot of work to unfreeze it, but especially with children. In my continuing education classes that I have to take, we talk about case studies all the time and just horror stories of children. They become 18 years old and they check it for the first time and they see all of this stuff on there that someone opened in their name and their credit is trashed, and now they have to work really hard to rebuild it. And it's just sad, but it happens and you're not aware of it because, obviously you're a child. So protecting your kids in that way, going to at least one of them to freeze it permanently. And then even if you're doing it for yourself, so like, let's say for me, but I'm going to buy a car, you can call the bureaus and temporarily unfreeze it for a certain amount of time, so maybe for 48 hours. So that way the car company or the lender that you're using, the credit union, whoever, can pull your credit, open a line of credit in your name because you authorized it ahead of time. The myfico.com is what I talk about with credit scores. Is there's so many different types of credit scores. There's the free credit scores that you see on your credit card sites, Credit Karma, your bank will offer it, and you see it everywhere. But me as a lender, we only use FICO scoring models, and there's like 16 different FICO scoring models as well. And so my FICO is where you can pull your FICO credit scores. You do have to pay for it. It's not free. It's an really extensive report. But if you are curious before you want to go purchase a home or do anything like that, if you're monitoring it, then you can pay it to see what we're actually seeing and know that it's accurate and not some random made up, credit scoring model type of thing.
So if you find that there's stuff on your credit report that's bad, you go to that FTC one to,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they have, they give you the directions of how to, if it's identity theft, you have to issue a police report. So you have to go through that first. And then it walks you through the steps of what to do with that police report in order to get everything taken off. If it's identity theft, fraud, or anything that's wrong, it will give you the letter templates. So let's say maybe it's reporting that you had a past due balance, but you've never paid late, or it's reporting that it's open and you know that it's closed. anything like that that could be wrong. It provides you sample letters that you can print out and mail to the bureaus to be able to do it the correct way to dispute those items to get it taken care of off your report. Yeah.
And I know that you're happy to help people too, because
yes.
it's one of those things
I will
really
offer
hard.
as much free advice as I can, and then if not, I have other parties that I'll refer to that you can pay for actual services. But I will always offer the free advice that I'm able to. So
thanks, Jen. I appreciate that
thank you
so much. So from the credit end, we are done with that one. We're going to go on to medical directives. So Christy had a book, Advanced Care Planning, that she brought to this presentation that she had done. And I would love to hear a little bit more about what we should do with some of that. Mike's going to be talking about kind of the legal end of those kind of things, but just wanted to kind of get your personal experience being a healthcare worker, Christy, and what you see making a difference for people with having this kind of stuff set up ahead of time and not having it set up ahead of time.
Okay. Can you hear me? I'm on a new set of earphones.
You're good.
Okay, perfect. Well, and I'm a social worker and not an attorney, but I do walk that fine line of not giving legal advice, but having to be familiar with the Texas Family Code. I only know Texas law, so if anybody's watching from outside of Texas, you'll have to get with somebody in your state that knows. This is what you were talking about, the advanced care planning.
Exactly. There you go.
The most important thing I think that people don't think that they're old enough to do is at least have the conversation. What are your wishes? You have a 20-year-old son. In Texas, you are his legal decision maker, you and your husband, because you are his parents. And the Texas Family Code lays out the next of kin. So if he had to have something and he hit his head and can't make decisions, it goes naturally to his parents, unless he's married. And then it would go to his spouse. And people just don't have the conversation regardless of age. He's 20 years old. You and his father should know his wishes, his medical wishes. I walked into like I said, I do hospice, so I'm working with lots of end of life. Walked into a home last week and they've been married 50 plus years. We're at end of life and she has no idea what his funeral arrangement wishes are.
Oh gosh.
That should have been a conversation that they had before now.
Yeah.
The term advanced care planning covers lots of different things. It covers medical power of attorney. It covers financial power of attorney. In the state of Texas, there is a document, we hear it all the time, that, oh, the doctor knows what I want. The doctor has my DNR at the hospital. That doesn't count in the state of Texas. If you're in a hospital building, there's one set of orders. And if you're outside of a hospital building, there is a form called an out-of-hospital do not resuscitate. That's important as we age. I'm 50. I don't have one because I do want heroic measures if I were to not be able to make decisions. But like you said, during COVID, I was in the hospital system, and too many times, people were outside and the patients inside couldn't make their wishes known, and they haven't had the conversations. And so we were doing a lot of that by phone.
Just to interrupt you and be rude, but I had that situation when I came down with COVID. So I was sitting at the desk right where I am right now, doing some work in the morning, and I got really dizzy and I'm like, oh my goodness. And I yelled for my husband and he's like, what? I'm like, no, come here. I need you. And he goes, what? I'm like, I'm dizzy. And he goes, go lay down in the bedroom. And I'm like, dude, I'm dizzy. I need you. And he came, and just in time, because I passed out and I'm on a swivel chair. So you could imagine how much damage could have happened. And I woke up, I was still sitting in the chair, and my son was on the phone with 911, and they were coming to the house, like they're on their way. So they got me to the bed so I could lie down. But they actually told me, they said, if you were out, you would go to the hospital. And my husband and my son could not have gone at that time. And if they had done any medical interventions, I would have been ticked beyond ticked. So when I heard what you were talking about, I was like, oh my gosh, this would be so much better to have this. And we already like have that information set up within our family, because we did that with my husband and I when we first got married 27 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I was that pre-planner kind of person that nobody else is. But
Yeah.
you know, with my son, that wasn't anything, and he knew where that kind of thing was, but he had never discussed it with us. So that's one of the reasons why I think it's important for having those conversations like you were saying.
Yes. And people often think because they have a living will that everything is laid out. But the caveats that set forth in the living will / advanced directive are that document is not a good legal document to be put into place unless there's two phrases: you are terminal or you are irreversible. So just because you have a living will, if you're not terminal, if you're not irreversible, with you having COVID or me being in a car wreck, that doesn't make you terminal and irreversible. So your living will is not a good document to be put into place. Another thing in Texas, and Mike can speak to this too, we hear a lot that people don't want to do paperwork because then someone's going to be able to make the decision for you. That's not actually truthful either. In the state of Texas, you can have I've had a medical power of attorney and a financial power of attorney since I was 25 because I work in healthcare. But that doesn't mean who I've designated makes my decision. They can only make my decision if a physician deems me incapacitated. And people often get mixed up with incompetent and incapacitated. Incompetent is a legal term that only a judge can set forth. Incapacitated is a physician saying they're over-medicated, they just had surgery, they've been anesthetized,
unconscious,
they have a concussion.
Because you passed out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we now are going to be able to activate this power of attorney. And so people, I think, are hesitant because I don't want my so-and-so to make my decisions. Well, they can't when you're up and walking around and healthy. Another one in Texas that we get a lot is the statutory or the durable power of attorney. And people think that that allows them to make medical decisions, and it does not. There is a form in Texas, the durable power of attorney, and in big, bold letters, there's a paragraph that very strictly lays out this document does not allow you to make medical decisions. So if you have the durable, it's important to have the medical also. You can write in a phrase that allows someone to make that decision for you, but people often neglect to do that. So now you're stuck with a financial power of attorney that does nothing for your medical decision. So lots of different documents go into what we call advanced care planning. But really the most important thing is for families to have the conversation, because the day that your 17-year-old turns 18, everything changes. And you as their parents are still their decision makers until the day they get married. But at 18 and a day, they can do a medical power of attorney and designate another decision maker. So the main thing is just the conversation and about funeral arrangements. What do you want after you're gone, after you've died? What are your wishes? You're asking about some worst case scenarios. It's also very important if you are separated and you are wanting to get divorced, to get divorced. I had one years ago, and they had been separated for 39 years. He had a new wife and a 15-year-old child, and he couldn't make decisions. And in talking to his new wife, come to find out, he had never legally divorced his first wife. So this lady he's now been with for 20 years has absolutely no authority to make decisions for him whatsoever. It's his separated legal wife who didn't want to make the decision. So then their adult child made the decisions. But that's one of the worst case scenarios. So I'm not an advocate of divorce, but if that's who you are, make sure you're legally divorced or you fill out a medical power of attorney.
Yeah.
Because your ex will be your decision maker. And that's not a spot that anybody wants to be in.
No, that's scary. Well, thank you. Do you have copies of that book that you can get to people if somebody wants one that we could have them mailed out? Okay.
Yes.
Then I'll just leave contact information in the follow-up to the video.
Okay.
and in the like below, in case somebody wants it, that I can just get some from you and mail it out.
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome.
And the most important thing about the books too is that they are workbooks. They are not legal documents in Texas.
But the workbook is great for the conversation, like you were saying.
Yes.
Having the discussion and determining where you want to be with all of it. That's huge.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Christy. Especially coming from your perspective, it's a little different than somebody, like Mike, who is going to be talking next. It's, you have that, this has been happening to people and I'm taking care of them, and let's try and make this better for everybody.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay, Mike, you are up, sir. So Mike Burgett is from Burgett Law Firm, and they handle all kinds of aspects of life and how to kind of go through all of them legally. So take it away. And if you want to share your screen, you are welcome to do so.
It sounds good. Thank you, and appreciate the opportunity to be here to chat. I used to, it says the host disabled screen sharing, so I won't be able to do that.
What?
Unless something changes, and if it doesn't, that's just fine. That's not a big deal.
Okay, I just clicked it again. Try it.
I got it now.
Okay.
Okay. And I think.
There you go.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Hey, there we go. Okay. So I'm located here in Waco, and contact website, that sort of thing is on the screen. I'll just move ahead here. So I'm going to cover a number of different things that are important to keep in mind for protecting your family. They're listed as bullet points 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 there. I'm going to spend not much time on a couple and more time on a couple as well. Really, I speak to groups all the time, and oftentimes I will ask the group, what's most important to you? And I have yet to have anybody raise their hand and say my 401k or my collector car or my second home or what have you. Every single time people respond with relationships, my spiritual values, my reputation, family. Those are the things that aren't tangible things that are most important. So really a lot of time and effort should go into planning for those things that are most important to you. I tell people really the best way to do that is with a comprehensive plan. And as this screen shows, key components of that are having a comprehensive will-based or trust-based plan. With that out of the way, I'd like to kind of zoom in a little bit on one aspect of planning that I do for families on a regular basis, and that's what kind of things should be in place to protect minor children. I do planning for all ages across the spectrum. Right before the Zoom meeting, I was speaking to a room of people about Medicaid and nursing home planning. Now we're shifting gears and talking about the other end of the spectrum, youngsters and so forth, and things to be aware of. So it's important to put some thought into what's the plan if something unthinkable happens. And that can be incapacity through an accident or an illness or even death of a parent, single parent or both parents or what have you. Really some thought needs to go into and planning about if I'm not here to be mom or dad, who can fill that role in my place? And it's so important to have that in place so that it's your decision, your plan that plays out, rather than allowing a court or a judge to make those decisions for you. Families are complicated, families are different. I'm not going to say that this is the case in my family, but if I passed away and Sarah was gone, we only have one minor child still. But there are certain extended family members who we'd be okay with raising our minor daughter. There are other family members who we would not be very excited about stepping in and taking over. So we want to be sure that our plan, our voice is in place in the event of really the unthinkable. So there's a couple of different documents that are really important to consider and have in place. One is an emergency guardian designation. The other is a long-term or permanent guardian designation. Again, you're deciding who steps in to fill my role if I can't do that with my minor children. kind of the scenario where an emergency guardianship or guardian designation might come into play would be you go out for dinner, you and your spouse go out for dinner, and you have a good time. You're on your way home, the babysitter has the kids, and there's a crash or something at the intersection, and you're going to be laid up for a while because you're not healthy. Okay. So police officer shows up to the babysitter, knocks on the door, and says, there's been an accident, there's minor children, we need to do something. The last thing anybody wants to have happen is that the police take children into custody. That's a bad word to say, into protective custody.
Custodianship.
Exactly, and put them in temporary foster care until things get sorted out. If you have an emergency guardian designation in place, there's a plan that can be relied on for immediately. Who steps in? You've said ahead of time, if there's an emergency, here's who's in charge. So that's really important for people to have in place. Is that likely to happen? No. But does it happen? Yes. So let's be prepared just in the event that unfortunate series of events would unfold.
And we were talking about this earlier, and I thought it was very interesting. I was watching The Chosen, like one of the little recap kind of things, and I think it was Jordan doing his My Limp stuff, and or just an interview with Amber, the gal that's on The Chosen that plays Tamar. And she, as a kid, had been at her dad's, and mom and two brothers and older sister were in a major car accident, and two of the boys died, and mom was totally incapacitated, and older sister was in the hospital for a long period of time, and she was with her dad. If dad had not been in the picture, what would have happened with her if she hadn't, if she had survived without any damage to her? And I thought, wow, that, losing two siblings all at once and then having your mom and sister incapacitated, at least she was with her dad. Right. But if that hadn't been available, how important is it to have that enumerated, in a place that too, a babysitter would know about, or a family member would know about. Right. Just being aware and having those discussions. I think the discussions are huge, but having it all written out so that legal recourse is taken, as opposed to, we find this later on. Exactly.
On the topic of the long-term guardian designation, if mom, dad are out for quite a while or permanently, it's important to, again, designate who's going to be in charge. And there's two different things to be thinking about here. There's guardianship over the person. That's who's going to decide where they go to school, where they live, where they go to church, that sort of thing, take them to the doctor. There's also guardianship over the estate, which are the assets that hopefully there are some to be able to support the child or children for the long term. Somebody needs to be designated over the funds for the child or children as well. Many times one person can fill both roles, but I have had situations where clients have told me, my sister is great with kids and terrible with money. My brother hates kids, but boy, he's a financial wizard. So we can split those roles. So one person is in charge of the funds and another is in charge of the childcare, basically. And there can be some value in separating those duties also, just as a peace of mind element, so that the money is used the best way possible for the kids and so forth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
There's already been some discussion about powers of attorney and some very good information presented. It's an opportunity for you to designate who can speak or act for you in the event that you can't do that for yourself. There's healthcare, there's financial, durable powers of attorney, of course. It's always important for mom and dad to have those in place for themselves. I always encourage parents of minor children to also have them in place for their minor children. So during a period where mom or dad are maybe traveling on vacation or maybe are incapacitated, they've set out through a power of attorney that covers their children who can take them to the doctor, who can talk to the school about things related to the schooling and so forth. Information is private and protected, and that's a very good thing, but there are situations where we do want to let people in to see some of that information to deal with life. Having a minor child power of attorney is a tool that can allow that to happen without having to get formal guardianship in place and so forth, if there's this is a short-term stint where mom or dad might not be available. On the healthcare side, of course, for adults, having that established and in place about who can speak for me, having a healthcare directive in place. HIPAA authorization is also something very valuable to have. Situation where a child turns 18, access to their banking or their financial information, that ends when they turn 18, unless they okay it. They can do that through a financial power of attorney, is one method for continuing access, and mom and dad helping out along the way. So definitely good things to have in place there as well.
Definitely.
I don't want to drone on, so that's kind of the whole gist of I'm going to stop my screen share here. There we go. Those are kind of the high points I wanted to touch on. I think that I'll just end on life changes and planning changes too. So I think there's really importance in establishing a relationship with somebody who can serve as a guide in a number of different capacities as we travel through the chapters of life. Minor children, before you know it, you have adult children, and before you know it, you're nearing retirement, and you have grandchildren, and then you're in a room full of people where I'm talking to you about Medicaid and estate plan or nursing home planning. So in a blink of an eye, things change, but I encourage people to just get connected and be able to have somebody who can guide them through all of that.
Well, and Mike, you did a great job of working with our son to put up, get his stuff written up and put into place. And it was, he was like, oh, this is cool. I got this all taken care of already. And he's very mature in some ways like that, which I think is very odd. But the fact that you made it easy, and that was a big deal for him and for us, because, Christy, you were talking about in Texas, we're the ones that would be taking care of him. Well, if he's on a trip to Boston or in California or in, another country, we want to make sure that we can do what we can and should be doing to help make decisions for his health and be able to access that information. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Mike. And I will be sharing everybody's contact information that can be shared at the end of the thing, at the little part on the bottom of the videos, just so that at least people have that information. So self-defense, this is another way you can protect yourself and your family. And I know this is kind of a funky shot. The gal on the left is my friend Haley Cowan Brennan, and she has a UFC contract. So she is an MMA fighter. She is one of the worship leaders at my church, and she is an awesome, awesome lady. So her and Desiree, the other gal who I do not know, have been doing self-defense classes here in Waco. And I think, we've talked so much. I haven't taken the class from them, but we've talked so much, and it's something that's a real passion for her to enable us to defend ourselves. Women tend to be the ones that don't know how to do it, but guys need to know how to defend themselves as well. And she's a very patient, loving, kind person, but she can beat the crap out of you if that's the situation that needs to take place. If you want to, you can go to that course thing. They don't have the next date scheduled. Both Haley and Desiree have fights coming up. Haley's is on the 25th. So what happens just before the fight is all up to UFC, and she is at their mercy. So she's like, I don't want to make a commitment to be on the call, but if you could share the information about the self-defense course, I would love to have that. And I think the last one they had like 40 people. So they will be planning another one soon, and I'm looking forward to taking it. Last 2 times they've had the classes is when I have been doing foot baths at my office and already had those scheduled and wasn't able to do it. I'll tell you a real quick story about when I was in my early 20s. I lived in Long Beach, not the greatest area of Long Beach. Right near the traffic circle. And when I was living there is when the riots took place. And yes, there were buildings on fire a couple blocks from my house. So kind of not the greatest space to be in once the riots were done and things like that had settled down. City of Long Beach did a self-defense course. And of course, where did they have it? One of the scariest parks in Long Beach that was on kind of my end of town. And I went there with 4 of my friends, the first class we went to, friends of ours, from church. And we walked in, and the teacher was a really, really nice guy. And he went around, and I thought it was so stupid, but he wanted to teach us something by doing this. He walked around and he introduced himself to you, and then he said, "Slap me." And I thought, that is bizarre that you would do that. And he goes, "I want you to be able to feel confident in fighting hard, no matter who that is, even if it were somebody that you knew that you need to defend yourself from." And so after that class, I was the only one that came back. And I learned some great, great tools and things that I absolutely loved. And since then, I've taken other self-defense classes using mixed martial arts. And oh my gosh, Deborah's there. Yay! She got the Zoom straightened out. But it was a bit brutal to have to slap somebody. And I've fought my brother before when I was growing up, so slapping him wasn't as hard as it probably should have been. But slapping the teacher was not what I had thought I was going to be doing that day. And not long after that, I was actually going to the grocery store, which was just around the corner from our apartment. And I was so hyper aware that I heard this like running feet behind me, like footsteps, and it was fast. And I like had my fist like this, and I turned, and I just like clenched and turned, and I like positioned myself to fight. And this poor little runner guy like bolted across 4 lanes of traffic where there was no traffic because it was super early. But I scared the crap out of this guy, but at least I scared him. If he had been an attacker, they weren't going to mess with me at that point if I was ready to throw down. So self-defense class at Blitz MMA, I really do trust Haley and the way that she does stuff. So I would love for you guys to join me there at some point. If you're not in the area and you're in another part of the United States, seek out a self-defense class. Honestly, for moms and daughters, going together, I think, is really powerful because you've got that backup and you can practice. Practice is a really important aspect. So enough about Haley and Desiree. This is my friend Deborah Davison, and Deborah is a firearms instructor, and she is my sweet, sweet friend. Deborah has been a firearms instructor for a while. She does firearms instruction for City of Waco Police. So she knows her stuff. They trust her. She is an excellent, there she is. She's back again. She keeps coming and going. But Deborah is great at working with you to explain it in a way that makes sense. And my husband was a police officer or a sheriff's deputy years ago, and he was trying to show me how to use firearms, and I was just miserable because it was not making any sense to me. Deborah did a great job of explaining it. So we went out to her little shooting range. It's on her property. And we took the guns that my husband and I own, and she went through everything with me, every single little aspect of working with a gun, what the different bullets are like, what you need to do to put them in your gun, making sure that it's the right thing. What's the difference between a hollow point and a solid point? What damage difference does that make in that person if somebody is getting hit by that bullet? And how to hold the gun safely. So I don't know if you can see in this picture, but down here, notice how she's got that positioned where she's got her hand underneath and she's holding the gun like that. That wasn't something that I had learned from my husband, and the way that she showed me made total sense. And firing with live ammunition, working in a way that made sense was huge. Making sure that you know how to handle the firearm, how to clean it at the end. If you are going to have someone come through the door, you want to make sure that you are stopping them You're not going to have them keep coming. Like, you know, a lot of times people will pretend like on movies that the bad guy has been shot 20 times and they'll still keep coming. You know, you want to be prepared in that situation, and how to be confident. I think practicing is one of those key things at a shooting range is really key. I haven't done it since we shot, but I also rely on my husband, which is probably not something that I should for a while. License to carry, it's a whole process to go through and get your license to carry. And conceal and carry, all of those kind of things. Deborah knows all of that stuff. She is fully aware, you know, she knows how to get you all set up with that. And she is so patient and pleasant to work with. I absolutely loved working with her. So I wanted to give her at a ready mind a little more information. Hopefully she can help more people with getting their comfort levels. And we're talking small children, you know, old enough to actually handle a firearm, to seniors. And it's not a scary thing if you know how to handle it. Next thing we're going to talk about is urgent natural health. So I am a certified teacher for the King Institute, and it is an organization up in the Frisco area where you use your hands and position them in different locations on the human body to stop something from happening that's dangerous to the body. So bleeding, burns, heart attack, asthma attack, anaphylaxis, migraine headaches, appendicitis, labor pain. Yes, labor pain can be stopped. We are not stopping the labor, but the labor pain can be stopped very simply. This is a book. Here, I'm going to stop this share. So this is my book. And this is my instructor book, because I got like my little binding. Nobody's going to cheat me and walk away with that book that has a different binding. But it goes through and shows you positions where you locate to stop something. So I'm going to show you how to stop a situation where someone is bleeding. And it's super easy. So what you want to think about, and the easiest way for me to remember this, is that my right hand is a good hand. Right? Being right is good. And so with bleeding, if someone's bleeding, it doesn't matter where they're bleeding, you can put, I'm just going to pretend like it's my head. So we'll pretend my head is bleeding, or it could be anywhere. But I'm going to put my hand here, and then I'm going to take my other hand and go on top of that one. So what I'm doing is I'm lining up the centers of my palms and position like this. This will literally stop bleeding. I have done this where my son had a bloody nose and he's sitting in front of me on the couch, and I just put my hands on top. So it's the right means you're going to keep it in. Good stuff. Hold that right hand down. That's the one that goes on the bottom. And then the other hand, notice I am not calling that hand anything but the other hand, because then you'll forget which one goes down. So setting that on top of his head and making a cross, nosebleed will stop. It can also help with contusions where you've got like a goose egg. Haley, I've told Haley about this when she's got fights. If you've got a bloody mess going on, put your hand on your eye. It will help that swelling go down. What it does is it draws the energy from the surface of the skin towards the bone, so it can literally stop and help seal the wound. I watched a movie that was just blew my mind. A guy was having this thing cut out of his head right here, and the nurse just had her hands positioned right here on the guy's shoulder. The doctor's cutting away at it, and you could totally see what was going on. Normally, the blood would be everywhere, and you would not be able to see any of it. It hardly bled at all. And at one point, she reached one of her hands out, the upper hand out, to grab an instrument to hand it to the doctor. So she's reaching out like this, and the blood started coming. She put her hand back, and it sucked some of it back in, and it stopped the bleeding. So that's one of my favorite tools, is that one. I use that often. Another one is to stop burns. I know that I have some people here that like to cook and like to eat hot food. Well, I have many times when I am cooking, I taste something, it's too hot, I burn my tongue. I'll turn the fire off and I will go sit down and do the stop burn technique. And you know how long it takes for your taste buds to like regenerate? I'll go sit maybe 10, 15 minutes. My taste buds are normal and I don't have that numb spot. So there are really cool techniques in here. I think everyone should know these simple techniques because you're literally using your hands. And the first time I ever had this happen, my husband and I was working for a nutritional supplement company, and my boss had bought a VHS tape. This wasn't that long ago, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, probably 9 years ago. He had bought a VHS tape about the King Institute and what they do. And they have a whole program of a lot of different aspects of working with your health by just positioning your hands in different locations. And I watched the video and I thought, wow, this is really cool. I've always been fascinated by energy and electricity. And that's the energy we're talking about. It's the electrical flow through your body. And so I watched the video. They showed a couple techniques. I don't remember which ones, except for I knew the heart attack one was on there. And I'm watching it out of interest, not to learn or to memorize. Not 3 weeks later, we were at a friend's house and had a couple friend that was in town from Spain. They were there on a mission, and they were, coming back to give a report. She was sitting at the table, or sitting on the hearth of the fireplace, and all of a sudden grabbed her chest. And I grabbed her chest. She grabbed it lower, but she grabbed her chest, and she's like, and one of the other ladies there was a nurse, and she said, explain to me, describe what you're feeling. What's going on, Suzanne? And Suzanne goes, my heart's racing like crazy. I don't know what's going on. And I was sitting about 6-7 feet away in a chair, and I felt like the Holy Spirit was saying, go help her. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm sitting there and praying, figured I pray. That's a good thing. I'm going to pray. And the nurse went over. She was kind of trying to attend to her. We're like, should we call 911? She goes, no, it'll stop. This will happen every once in a while. Again, I felt like God was saying, you need to go help her. And I thought, I don't know what I'm doing. I can't do it. And immediately he said, you go help her. And I'm like, okay, I can't say no to God 3 times or I'm going to be dead. So I walked over there and I'm like, I don't know if I'm doing this right or not, but I put my hand in the position, my right hand in the position where I was hoping it was supposed to be on the back. I wasn't sure where it was supposed to be at all. And then I grabbed her left pinky. And the second that I touched her pinky, not even holding it, and it wasn't like a death grip, just literally a gentle hold, I felt like I had been plugged into an electrical socket. I had electric energy just flow through me, and I felt it go from this hand to this hand. It zapped through my body, and I'm like, did you feel that? And she's like, no. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what was that? And it was God showing me this is something you need to be paying attention to. And I sat there, and you're supposed to feel the pulses. The pulses will change. And as I sat there, I realized they're getting in sync. Oh my gosh, they're getting in sync. Like, I must be doing something right. And I was really excited, but all I was doing was praying. I just, I was laying on hands and praying and trying to pray that I was putting my hands in the right position. And when they got synced up, and I was, focused on that for a little bit, and I go, you're okay, aren't you? And she's like, yeah, I am. And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. That was a powerful illustration of what God wanted for me to be paying attention to in my life. So, it was simple. Honestly, a 4-year-old, if they have enough attention, they can learn these techniques. It's not difficult. Even stopping bleeding for themselves. If kids falls down and gets a scrape, they can do it even at a really, really young age. So I'm going to be doing 2 classes in March. I don't have the dates set yet because I'm still waiting on somebody who said they really wanted to do the class, and I want to make sure I can include them. But you get a book as part of it. It's a requirement for the class. You get the book, and you get 4 hours of instruction. And I go into more than what is just in the book. I go into self-help techniques as well, because if you're the only one at home and you've got to take care of yourself and you're having a heart attack, do you know how to stop it? I do. And I can teach you how to do that. So, bleeding, I can't tell you how many times I've stopped bleeding for myself. Doing something in the kitchen. Actually, Deborah, that wasn't able to be on it. She was at my house, and she's a petite person, and I'm not. And so I was trying to help the recliner go back, and I got my finger in a really bad spot and almost chopped my finger off with the recliner mechanism. And there was a huge line in my hand, and she goes, "Did you use that stop bleeding technique?" And I'm like, "Well, it's not bleeding, but it is inflamed." So I did the technique, and it was amazing. I didn't even hardly get a bruise when it looked like my finger was almost pinched right off. It was that serious. So great techniques, super important, I think, to help save sanity and your lives. And I don't know if there's any other questions, but do you guys have any questions, any concerns, comments, snide remarks? Okay, there was laughter. That's a good thing. All right, so I'm going to put my contact information up here. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me tonight. Your input and your expertise are so valuable, and I just wanted to make sure I could give people that opportunity to learn. I know there's a few people that are going to be watching the videos later, so I will put the information in there, how to contact you if there's questions or concerns, or like with you, Christy, it's not like you're the legal professional, but to get that book out to them would be an awesome thing to be able to provide them with. So here's my contact information. Oh, no, that's not contact information, but we're going to go there. God's design, we want the body to be able to heal itself, and I work with God's design so you can thrive. And there's my contact information. So Dr. Carrie Barron, naturopathic doctor here in Waco, Texas. God bless you. Have an amazing evening, and thank you for being with me.